feel like your brain is just like a ticket printer that won't stop printing out bullshit orders that you don't have on the menu? For a long time, it kind of felt like that is what was happening in my own head. You know, I had all these orders coming in, but none of them were on my station, and yet I still tried to execute all of the dishes that were coming through, even though I didn't have the prep for it. You know, I would still believe the orders that were coming through, even though I knew that they weren't on the menu. And I came across this principle a couple years ago in Zen teachings, and it profoundly changed the way that I looked at myself. And I want to kind of use some kitchen metaphors to examine this and see how it plays into all of our lives, because this totally turned my world upside down. When you create an awesome dish, right? When you're like rocking it and you take a bite and then you're like, oh my God, this is perfectly balanced, expertly executed. It's amazing. And we've all had those moments, right? Of course, because we're all badasses. But when you're in that moment and you're enjoying something that you've created and you tell yourself, like, this is delicious, this is awesome, I nailed this, who's telling you that you're telling yourself that? Who is observing those thoughts, right? You're having them, but you're also observing them. And in Zen teachings, this is known as the theory of two minds, whereas we have two things that are happening in our head at any given time. We have our thinking mind and we have our observing mind. Before I came across this principle, I used to call it my brain and my mind. I would differentiate it that way. But for the sake of continuity on our channel here, I want to call this our ticket printer and our expo. So what happens if your ticket printer just starts going crazy? What does your poor expo do? Do they try and filter through every single order that's coming in, even though it's nothing that's on the menu and it might be from, 3 restaurants down the street that just happen to end up on your Wi-Fi? No. Who's going to sit there and do that? They're going to be like, fuck this job sucks, and then they're going to quit. And then what's going to happen to your ticket printer? It's just going to keep rolling. It's going to keep rolling, and stupid shit is going to keep coming out. And our ticket printers are thoughts, right? Our ticket printer is all that self-doubt and criticism and bashing of ourselves all the time. We don't have an expo anymore, so we're trying to deal with all of this ourselves. We're trying to fan 100 fires with no fire extinguisher. It's impossible. And it's super overwhelming, and it's not healthy. So what I want to illustrate with this video is we are all capable of getting our expediter back. And in Zen teachings, this is known as a theory of two minds. It essentially states that we have our thinking mind and we have our observing mind. We have our ticket printer that keeps spouting off all of these orders that we don't have in-house, we don't need, that aren't relevant to our life and our station and our job that night. And we have our expediter, the one who kind of filters through it all and makes sense of how many steaks we need, or how many salads we need, or what time table 8 sat, and when they need their third course, Without our expediter, we're a mess. You guys ever worked in one of those restaurants where you have to do multi-course tasting? If you don't have an expediter that knows what they're doing, the entire kitchen is fucked, right? It becomes this like horrifying circus where nobody has their shit together and plates are going out wrong and you're remaking orders all the time. Well, that's your head right now. Your head right now is a ticket printer on a busy Friday night with no expediter. You're expecting yourself to just kind of be able to sort through it all, but you can't. I know this probably sounds really insane to anybody who's never thought about this before. And I've been in that boat and I was like, okay, no, I'm in control of everything, right? But until you really grasp this idea that we have a thinking mind and we have an observing mind, you are forever a slave to your thoughts. Who wants that? That's what got us here in the first place. So if you are making a commitment to yourself now to get out of this headspace that you found yourself in, this is step one. We need to understand that we have two different mental functions that control our lives, right? And when we realize this, we can start to control our thoughts. So right now I want to do a little exercise with you guys. I want you to think about nothing for the next 30 seconds. Blank slate, absolutely nothing, just infinite expanse and nothingness. Press pause, come back. How'd that go? The first time I tried a meditation and they were like, think about nothing, I literally thought of everything in the universe at once. It was like every neuron in my brain was like, remember this time. And I was like, oh my God, that's exactly what I didn't want to happen. So now that we know we've all collectively failed at that, let's try something maybe a little bit easier. I want you to think about what you're thinking about for the next minute. Again, feel free to pause this and come back, because this is a really interesting exercise when you've never done anything like this before. Just try and understand what you're thinking about. So if somebody were to ask you in conversation, what am I thinking about? You'd be able to tell them, are you thinking about your prep list? Are you thinking about your cat? Are you thinking about your significant other? Are you thinking about your to-do list or your laundry or your taxes? What are you thinking about right now? Hit pause. All right, again, so you probably didn't do so great at that. Chances are you were able to kind of hold on to a thought for a second and then it just kind of floats away, It's like it's there and then it's gone. And then many people can understand this with dreams. It's a similar principle. When you first wake up, your dreams are super vivid for some of us. And then as soon as you try and tell someone what you dreamt about, it is gone from your entire consciousness immediately. Especially the better the dream is and the more that you want to tell someone about it, the more you end up forgetting it. So this is a prime example of your mind observing itself, right? Or your mind observing your brain, or your expediter understanding what the fuck is on your ticket printer. So the most amazing thing for me personally that came out of this whole idea is that it gave me the ability to dissociate my thoughts from myself. It kind of put them into two different categories. Instead of saying, I'm depressed, I started saying, I'm feeling depressed right now. It's disconnecting the emotion from the person and just understanding that I'm not depression embodied as an emotion, right? I am experiencing a state of depression currently, but I am not depression, I was not anger incarnate, right? I'm experiencing a temporary state of anger. I'm not sadness. I'm experiencing a temporary state of being sad because something in my life has happened where an appropriate response is sadness. And this is a very, very subtle shift that you can make with the language that you use that begins to slowly and dramatically alter the course of your life. It frees you from being a slave to your emotions because it takes away the control the emotion has over you. And this is a really important thing to remember because ultimately it's our thoughts that create our depression. And so if we can dissociate our thoughts from ourselves and realize that we are not our thoughts, we are the thinker of our thoughts, and we are also the observer of these thoughts. And that frees you up in a way that's really indescribable, because at the end of the day, you're not the ticket printer. You're the one reading the orders. And if you're giving yourself terrible orders, then of course your dish is going to come out inedible. Of course the reviews of your restaurant aren't going to be good, right? The frustrating thing about the English language, or one of them I should say, is that feelings are almost always implied. We don't ever say feel in most day-to-day sentences, right? We'll say, I'm hungry, when what we really mean is, I'm feeling physical signs of hunger. We'll say, I'm sad, when we really mean, this thing is making me feel saddened. We say, I'm depressed, instead of, I'm feeling a temporary state of depression due to a lot of circumstances in my life that are not currently ideal. We're saying, I'm frustrated, instead of, I'm currently feeling frustration towards this, whatever this is, right? So we imply that we're feeling, but we never acknowledge that we're feeling. And I think that's an unfortunate cause of a lot of our own mental anguish, is that we imply our feelings, but we never really examine or understand them. But we never really examine them or take the time to understand them fully. And this comes from the Zen principle of two minds as well, whereas instead of saying, I am depressed, you say, I'm feeling depression. Because you're not depression, right? You are not the embodiment of depression. You are in a state, a current state of feeling depression. This principle was illustrated pretty well in Fight Club, if any of you have seen that movie, where the end result is he realizes that he's both of the thinking and the observing mind, He is all the thoughts and his actions and the person who controls them all. And so what I realize is that most of our psychological and emotional stress in life, especially when you are in a depressed brain state, is that our thinking mind and our observing mind, to use the Zen terms, are fused, and we don't know this. This isn't something that's taught everywhere, especially in the Western world. When we come to the realization that we do have two different things in our head, right? We have our brain and our mind, or we have our ticket printer and our expo, or we have our thinking mind and our observing mind. It's amazing because it puts the power back in our hand. It's amazing because it allows us to start separating the things that come into our head. And it starts allowing us to decide what we give our attention to and what we focus on. Because before, the majority of us think that it's only one thing in our head that controls what we do and who we are. But when we realize it's two, everything starts to change. That's because our thoughts create our reality, right? So if we're always thinking negative things, we're only going to see negative things. If we're always hanging out with negative people, we're only going to think that negative people exist in this world. So it's the thought and it's the attention that you give it that create the feelings. So what happens to most of us is that we believe the thoughts and the words in our head. When you believe them, that's when you create that feeling. Because if you believe that you're worthless, you're going to feel the feeling of worthlessness, and then that's all that you're going to see. You're going to become controlled by worthlessness. If you believe that nothing good will ever happen to you, your confirmation bias will kick in, and you will only see things that support this argument. Despite how much you say that you want to feel differently, or you want your life to be differently, until you change your beliefs, your reality will stay exactly the way that it is right now. And if you don't like that, you're fucked, unless you do something about it. It's not luck that creates a better life. It's conscious awareness of possibility. If you think something's not ever possible for you, it's never going to happen. Plain and simple. You will ignore things that support the belief because you don't believe it. Your brain is always trying to protect you, right? And it's always going to do what it thinks that you want it to do. And if you keep telling it that you don't think that anything good is ever going to happen to you, if you keep telling it that this is as good as it's ever going to get and I'm always going to be this way, your brain believes it because you haven't found your expo yet. So if your ticket printer is just spewing out, this is as good as it will ever get for you, don't bother trying to find something better. Don't bother wanting anything more for your life. Then your expo's not going to be there to slap some sense into you and be like, what are you talking about? Of course you are. Of course you're not. Of course this is not as good as it gets. Your life can literally go in a million different directions from this moment right now, but you have to believe that. And if you believe that it's never going to get any better, it won't. It is much easier to live in a state of fear than it is a state of wonder. So the trick is we need to not fuse with these emotions when they arise, right? It's a very subtle shift, but it's something that can have profound implications on your life. So next time you're feeling a really unpleasant emotion, identify it, right? We've talked about that a bunch. But then remember that you're not that emotion. It's just something that you're feeling right now, like hunger or thirst or needing to use the bathroom. And when you're hungry, you don't say, I am the embodiment of hunger. And okay, well, maybe that's not the best example because hunger certainly does control some of us, right? I wouldn't call it hanger for nothing. But if we have to, if we're experiencing an emotion, we're not that emotion. We're just experiencing it. So just let it be. Understand that, yeah, right now I'm feeling a little salty about something. But are you salty in general? No. Emotions are not a choice, all right? But our behavior is. And if we choose to allow ourselves to live in fear and accept the worst case scenario every time that something is presented to us, then our life will be a reflection of that until we learn to separate and control what goes on in our head by recognizing that there are two components, not one, to everything that you think. We will forever be a slave to our own emotions. This principle, with its simplicity, allowed me to beat 12 years of depression. This one little shift in language started to open my mind up in a way that I never thought possible. So I really hope you guys can take this to heart and start to learn to become the observer instead of living perpetually as the thinker. Step into your role as the expediter instead of just trying to burn the ticket printer or bury it deep underground where nobody can hear it clicking away, ordering in lobster ravioli at a sushi restaurant. Until you can find the good instead of wallowing in the evil, you're always going to be miserable. And the moment that this really sank in for me is the moment I stopped being miserable. And people ask me all the time, like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this project? Because I know how much it sucks to have your life controlled by emotions. I know how shitty and how dark it gets and how overwhelming everything is. And I just don't want anyone to feel that ever again. I don't know if this is going to help at all, but maybe if it'll help one of you, maybe it'll be worth it. I don't know. You tell me. Am I crazy or is this a good idea? Are you guys getting any value from the things that I'm saying, or are you just kind of fast forwarding after 5 minutes and being like, you're kind of nuts? What do you want me to talk about? Let me know in the comments. Interact. Say hi. Let me know you're here. I appreciate it. And I really want to go on this journey together. Make our industry an example of the way that things can be instead of just settling for the way that they've always been. Maybe inspire other people in other industries to kind of get their own collective shit together and make things not so terrible overall. Let's understand each other, but first we gotta understand ourselves. So, good luck with that, and good luck with your feelings. If you do try this, let me know how it works out. Because for me, that simple shift of I am not depressed, I am feeling depression. That simple shift changed my life. And I didn't realize it for a couple months, but when the awareness hits, it's going to hit you like a ton of bricks. And it's not going to be when you're looking for it either. You're going to have a moment where you're just whittling away at something, chopping onions, mindless task that you're used to doing a million times. And then it's going to hit you that you're talking to yourself. And then you're going to know that you're talking to yourself. And you're going to be strangely okay with it. Because the stigma of talking to yourself is a bad thing, you'll now understand is a steaming load of shit, you know? It's a great thing. And when you get to that point, give yourself a hug and realize that you did it. You pulled yourself out. You found yourself again. What we mean when we say we need to find ourselves. It's that part of ourselves that makes the executive decision. Get yourself out of autopilot. Take control. It's not that difficult. Good luck on your journey. Let me know how it goes.